on the issues of famine and the safety of humanitarian workers in the Gaza Strip, which has been suffering an unprecedented Zionist aggression since October 7. And the number of civilians killed in the Gaza Strip since October 7 has risen to 33,634, most of them women and children. The number of injured has so far reached 76,214. Those were the headlines, and now the news in detail from Radio Algeria International. First in our news, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the National Community Abroad, Ahmed Attaf, has received a telephone call from the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, His Highness Prince Faisal bin Farhan Al Saud, according to a statement from the ministry. On this occasion, the two ministers exchanged greetings on the occasion of Eid al-Fitr and discussed the latest developments in the occupied Palestinian territories in general, and particularly in the Gaza Strip, which has been under a continuous Zionist aggression for more than 6 months now. They also seized this opportunity to exchange views and coordinate in view of the imminent deadlines concerning the Palestinian question, notably diplomatic efforts being made to enable the State of Palestine to obtain full membership of the United Nations. The Chief of Staff of the National People's Army, ANP, Army General Saeed Shingri, has presided over a ceremony at the headquarters of the Ministry of National Defense to exchange greetings on the occasion of Eid al-Fitr, according to a statement from the Ministry of National Defense. And the President of the Algerian Red Crescent, Mrs. Ibtissam Hamlawi, has shared the joy of Eid al-Fitr with Palestinian children and those accompanying them at the Bni Msous Military Hospital in Algiers, according to a press release from this humanitarian organization. During her visit, Mrs. Hamlawi ensured all the needs expressed by the children and their carers, in addition to distributing electronic tablets, toys, clothes, and gifts to the children for Eid al-Fitr. On March 29, Palestinian children and their carers were evacuated from Cairo Airport in Egypt to the Boufarik Air Base aboard two medical aircraft belonging to the Algerian Air Forces. And at least 25 civilians today have been killed and others injured as a result of the Zionist warplanes bombing of a house in the Gaza Strip as part of the ongoing savage Zionist onslaught on the besieged enclave, which has entered its 188th day. According to medical authorities, the number of civilians killed in the Gaza Strip since October 7 has risen to 33,630 or 634, most of them women and children. The number of injured has so far reached 76,214. According to the same source, the Zionist Occupation Army has committed 8 massacres in the last 24 hours in the Gaza Strip, killing 89 people and injuring 120 others. Saad Bougazi has more details in this report.
The occupation aircraft launched intense air raids targeting a house of the Tabatibi family in the Sidra area in the Daraj neighborhood in central Gaza City, resulting in the killing of 25 civilians and wounding dozens. Meanwhile, the Zionist warplanes also targeted the northern areas of the Nusayrat camp in the central Gaza Strip, while the occupation army blew up a number of buildings north of the camp. According to medical sources, a number of civilians were wounded in a Zionist airstrike targeting a school housing displaced people in Nusayrat camp. Ambulance and civil defense crews managed to recover the decomposed bodies of 13 people from the El Balad area and the El Amal neighborhood in Khan Yunis governorate south of the Gaza Strip. Occupation warboats targeted a primary school in the Nusayrat camp, resulting in the killing of 1 civilian and causing the injury of dozens of others. The occupation also continues its war of starvation against civilians, while hospitals in the Gaza Strip have been witnessing a catastrophic situation in light of the lack of medical supplies. According to medical sources, about 90% of civilians have been forcibly displaced to the south, away from the ongoing Israeli shelling.
And the members of the UN Security Council have failed to reach a consensus to recommend that the State of Palestine join the United Nations, announced the Maltese ambassador who chairs the Council in April. There was no consensus on the admission of a Palestinian state, said Vanessa Frazier at the end of a meeting held behind closed doors, but this absence of consensus does not prevent a member state from putting the issue to a vote in the Council. She stated that the 2/3 of the Council members were in favor of full membership of the State of Palestine without naming them, but this committee can only take decisions by consensus. This does not, however, mark the end of the Palestinian approach. Following the committee's report, any member state of the Council can in fact put a resolution on accession to the vote. According to diplomatic sources, a vote could take place on April 18 within the Council. And the President of the European Council, Charles Michel, has said that European Union countries wishing to recognize the State of Palestine should act together in order to trigger significant progress in consolidating peace in the region. Speaking to journalists in Brussels this week, Charles Michel spoke of coordination at European level between the member states prepared to formally recognize the sovereign Palestinian state. Michel, who is responsible for forging a consensus between the 27 EU leaders, suggested that other like-minded countries outside the bloc could also join the initiative. He suggested that the EU should use the tools at its disposal, such as the association agreement, to ensure that the Zionist entity respects the rule of law and international humanitarian law. And 2 Palestinians have been killed by the Zionist occupiers in the town of Tubas in the north of the occupied West Bank, the Wafa news agency reported. 1 Palestinian was killed and 3 others were wounded by bullets when the Zionist occupying forces stormed the Al-Farah refugee camp near Tubas in the north of the occupied West Bank. Medical sources have confirmed that young Mohammed Issam Shahmawi was killed after being shot in the head. A second Palestinian was martyred in Tubas after the occupation forces opened fire on his vehicle, the same source added, noting that the occupying forces have stormed the town in the morning and deployed several of its neighborhoods. The United Nations Security Council approved yesterday, Thursday, a draft press release at the initiative of Algeria, Guyana, and Slovenia on the issues of famine and the safety of humanitarian workers in the Gaza Strip, which has been suffering an unprecedented Zionist aggression since October 7. In the document approved by consensus, the members of the Security Council expressed their concern following the Zionist strikes that killed 7 members of the NGO World Central Kitchen a fortnight ago. This appalling attack brought the number of humanitarian workers killed in Gaza during the conflict to 224, more than 3 times the number of humanitarian workers killed in any recorded conflict in 1 year, writes the test. And we have more details in this report by our colleague Saad Bouazi.
The members of the Security Council who met to discuss famine and the safety of humanitarian workers in Gaza say that accountability is necessary, demanding a transparent investigation. They also demanded that humanitarian workers be protected, as well as infrastructure and operations carried out under the protection of international law. The members of the Security Council also reiterated their deep concern about the human toll of the ongoing Zionist aggression in Gaza, the catastrophic humanitarian situation, and the threat of imminent famine in the Palestinian enclave. They called for the Zionist blockade to be lifted immediately and for the delivery of humanitarian aid to be facilitated. The document also calls for full respect for international law, international humanitarian law, and international human rights law, and for a lasting ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. The Council also expresses its full support for the Humanitarian and Reconstruction Coordinator for Gaza within the framework of Resolution 2720 of 2023, as well as for the efforts of all UN personnel and agencies, including UNRWA, who are working to provide humanitarian assistance to civilians in Gaza. Finally, it condemned all acts of violence targeting civilians.
And more than 250 humanitarian and human rights organizations have announced that they have joined an open letter calling for an immediate halt to all arms transfers to the Zionist entity. We call for an immediate ceasefire and appeal to all states to cease the transfer of weapons that can be used to commit violations of international humanitarian and human laws, the organization pleaded. The open letter was launched in January 2024 by 16 organizations and now has more than 250 signatures, including those of Amnesty International, Save the Children, Oxfam, Médecins du Monde, Caritas International, and a number of faith-based and feminist NGOs. And the price of the organization of the petroleum exporting countries OPEC rose by almost 4% in March, reaching an average of $84 $1.22 a barrel, the organization said in its monthly report published yesterday. Saad Bougaza has more details in this concise report.
The OPEC basket, which is the average of the prices of the 12 OPEC crude oils, rose by $2.99 or 3.7% over 1 month to stand at $84.22 a barrel in March, compared with $81.23 in February, the document states. Crude oil prices continued their upward trajectory in March, buoyed by increasingly positive sentiment about market fundamentals against a backdrop of a high-risk premium, the report points out. OPEC also reported that its member countries produced 26.604 million barrels per day in March, compared with 26.601 million barrels a day 1 month before, according to secondary sources. It is worth recalling that the average production of the countries in the organization was 27.011 in 2023. As for world oil demand, the organization's forecast remained unchanged for 2024, with a growth of 2.2 million barrels a day. For 2025, oil demand is expected to increase by 1.8 million barrels a day year on year, while demand from OECD countries is expected to grow by 0.1 million barrels a day, according to the same source.
And with this last piece of news, we come to the end of this news bulletin for today. Time now for our weekly program, starting with this special program devoted to Eid al-Fitr by my colleague Aziz Agassi. It will be followed by another program on Maluf music or musical genre. And with this, we come to the end of it. As I said before, we'll meet again tomorrow for first edition of our news bulletin. Thank you. Bye-bye.